Hello and welcome to another edition of Sunspots. My name's Evan Cooke, joined by head coach of the Sun, Ben Macauley, as we've got lots to talk about over this past weekend, as well as looking ahead to a big game against Kamloops coming up this coming weekend. We'll start with what happened over the weekend in Chilliwack against the Huskers, a team that you guys had soundly beat here in Kelowna earlier this season. Another pretty decisive win, 42-3 over the Huskers on the weekend. What were some of the takeaways that you and your coaching staff had over the weekend? It seemed like you guys were pretty comfortable in the midst of the game as some second and third string guys made their way onto the field.
Yeah, we were happy with getting a quick start. That was really important for us. Not to take any game for granted, but we knew it would be a chance to get our depth players some repetitions and game experience. And we kind of went in with the mindset that once we made the switch to our backups, we were going to go with them for the rest of the game, and we weren't going to bring our first stringers back in to bail them out. So, that was important for us to get to a quick start, so we were able to do that. We played a really physical, smart first quarter of football, and shortly after that, we were able to roll some other guys in.
Yeah, talk about that fast start that you got off to, because at points in this season, that's something that we haven't really been able to say about the group, is that boy, they came out of the gate really quickly. This week was a little different, points on the first few possessions, and it really set a tone early on.
Yeah, and we were playing with Keith Zyla again for the first time since week one, and that's a situation like that is you want to build your quarterback's confidence up. So as coaches, we have to do a good job of not calling plays that we think are going to do well, but calling plays that we think our guys can do well. If they're confident in something, they're going to run it well, and that's what we've kind of shifted our focus to. Is rather than schematically trying to do what's best possible for the situation, is do what's best for our players, and so they can be successful, setting them up so they're not in a situation that's tough for them to win in.
This weekend also featured the return of Rashawn Simonize, and he and Keith hooked up on a couple of touchdown passes in the game. Must be nice to see him back out there and seeing him kind of come back in and pick up where he left off.
Yeah, he's a really dynamic player. He can do a lot of things. In fact, we had him on a lot of special teams as well. Heading into the 40-man roster, we've got to have guys do multiple things. So for him to pick up the offense and a bunch of special teams assignments that quickly just shows, his dedication to learning and his willingness to do what's necessary to win. And we've got a bunch of guys like that, and Rashawn just kind of falling in line with the rest of the team that way. It goes a long way in the locker room to kind of ingratiating himself after not being around for a little while.
The special teams element's an interesting one, because we saw at one point in the game where I think it was on a convert attempt, you had him out wide as a receiver, and then he almost was able to come up with a catch for 2 points there. Does he bring things that you might not have otherwise mixed into a playbook just because of his stature and his playmaking ability?
Yeah, it's junior football is all about the matchups, and 9 times out of 10 we're going to get a favorable matchup on single coverage with a guy who's undersized guarding him. So if we get a chance to give him a jump ball close to the end zone, most times he's going to win those. This weekend was more about putting it on film, so it's another thing that teams have to prepare for. You don't get to just kind of coast through the week without thinking about things like that. So the more dynamic we can be in our play calling and using our guys to their strengths, the more the team has to prepare for, and that's wasting their time, or even if we don't run it next week, it's something they've got to think about that we could run it. So it tends to make them a little bit more vanilla in their play calling. Whether it works or not is yet to be seen, but it's something that we have the ability to do, so we're going to do it.
Kind of an interesting fine line that you draw as coaches then there, because some elements you want to keep under wraps and hold on to that for that element of surprise, but then like you say, you want to get other teams thinking about the possibilities of things you might pull off as well.
Yeah, if you sit on things for too long, you're not sure if you can run them yourself. We've got to try things out in the game speed. It's one thing doing it in practice, there's no pressure. It's another thing doing it in the game. The more we can do things like that in the game, the more confident we are to do them when we need to do them. So, by getting some of that on film, we can evaluate it, see where we need to make changes, and see if it's something we want to keep in our playbook.
As the offense as a whole continues to grow, you've added Rashawn now, and there's been a couple guys come in, Shamar Donaldson from injury over the last few weeks. It looks like from an offensive standpoint, you're getting more mouths that you have to feed. That's a lot of guys to keep happy in terms of getting them their passes, getting them their touches. How do you deal with that going forward?
Sure. I mean, that's the guys you want to have. You want guys who want the football, and we've got a lot of guys who want the football. At the end of the day, they've got to put their personal goals secondary to team goals, and our team goal is to win. And whether it's Shamar or Rashawn or Nate Anderson or Kyler Mosley getting the touches, ultimately it doesn't matter to me, it doesn't matter to our offensive coordinator, Mike Wolfhausen. We want to get the job done. And the cream will rise to the top. Guys will make plays when given opportunities. And some guys may have to wait a little bit longer for their turn to make things happen. That's just the nature of the game. But I'd rather have that than one or two guys who does everything and the other guys don't expect to be involved. So when their time comes, they're not ready. We've got a bunch of guys who are ready to play. We just also added a running back from last year, Abdi, who's coming back for another season with us as of this week. So he gives us yet another offensive weapon. We've got to figure out how to get in there, but good problems to have. We're healthy, we're getting healthier, and we're adding excellent weapons to our team.
In terms of the running back position, Tanner Sudo's another name that we haven't seen out on the field this year because of an injury. Is he still expected to get out there at some point?
He practiced most of the week last week. He's finally coming back after a leg injury. He looked great last week. Once he kind of gets his head around the playbook, he's going to be one of the best running backs in the league, if not the country. I don't like to overshoot things, but he just gives such a kind of a combination of what we've got with Kelton and with Hansen. He's got the speed, and he can run north and south, and he's very tough. He's a national champion in judo, so watching him move his body, get off of blocks or tackles, he does very well in that situation. So it's going to be exciting to see how he fits in, whether that's toward the end of the season or early next season. We expect him to be a big part of the offense.
Dealing with injuries is never fun, but is there a flip side of that a little bit where you've got guys now who are going to come back into the team next year, come back into the team the next couple of years, who got some pretty valuable playing experience earlier on in this season?
Yeah, and that's one thing we tell all of the recruits is that we're going to give you the opportunity to play right away. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. For some guys, their rookie year they get to play. Other guys, it doesn't happen. Sometimes it takes a little more time to develop. We're getting guys who are developing right in front of our eyes. Helps us for recruiting next year and kind of determining where our holes are, where we need to fill. But with so many skilled guys, guys are going to have the opportunity to move on, to the next level, whether it's university or pro. But for right now, we've got a stable of guys who are developing and making our program very strong. And the more we can do that, the more we can get guys to accept their roles, that they aren't always the ball carrier. They've got important roles to play, even if they're not on the field. And that's crucial come playoff time. If they can buy into that, we've got long-term success for our program.
Wanted to ask you about the defense as well. As you see a game like this past weekend, just 3 points allowed to the Huskers in that one, where do you feel where they are right now in terms of maybe what your expectations were with them going into the season? Obviously a highly skilled group, a pretty deep group. How do you feel that they have kind of managed to put the last couple of weeks together?
Well, we started out really strong. We did some simple things really well. As the season progresses, you ask them to do a little bit more, be a little more complex and diverse with our play calling, and that can lead to some assignment struggles, and it has. We've especially against Vancouver Island last week, and a few gaffes this weekend against Chilliwack. Looking at that group, they've really come a long way. They're an excellent talented group, especially the front seven. The defensive backs, we've got guys moving around, still trying to find the best fit for everyone heading into the playoffs, but they're right where we need them to be. We're going to ask them to do a few more things by the time the season's up, and then really tuning up for playoff football, making sure we're playing perfect every snap.
What are you seeing with how opposing teams adjust to your defense? Because there was a lot of talk, of course, earlier in the year about how strong that front seven is. It looked like at times over the weekend, Chilliwack was kind of targeting you guys down the middle in that cover three defense. How have you seen teams adjust to that and maybe try to stretch out the field a little bit against you?
Well, teams are going to try what, their last resorts. If they can't get it done between the tackles, which most teams want to be able to do, especially on first down, is be able to move the chains on the ground. If they can't get it done on the ground, they've got to find a place to do it in the air. And, we've got great cover linebackers, and we've got really punishing DBs. So, anytime there's anything short or across the middle, you can expect 6 or 7 guys to bring quite a bit of contact to them. And that's not something you want to do or can do all day because injuries start to pile up. And so if you can stretch the field and get some one-on-one situations, and I think some teams have been able to do that, and it's just, is part of the game that we have to adjust to. And we've got get our guys ready to be able to play through situations like that, knowing that teams are going to take some shots downfield. It's going to happen occasionally. When you're playing so strong up front, occasionally stuff's going to get behind you. It's just the ability to bounce back and shut them down the next play.
Coming out of the Vancouver Island game, heading into the game against Chilliwack, we talked a little bit about special teams as well and how against the Raiders, they just weren't at the level that we've seen them in weeks past. How did you feel they responded against the Huskers?
Well, it was, not going to lie, we were pretty hard on them this week in practice, specifically at the beginning of the week. We felt we probably came a bit complacent. It's easy to buy into reading the articles about how good you are and looking at the stat sheet and believing the hype about yourselves, but we know that's not true. We've got to really hammer home the importance of fundamentals, and that's what we did last week. And it wasn't so much scheme, it was effort. And it's tough when you're 2 months into doing the same thing every day. Finding the passion that you have for the game is really important, and that's something we tried to elicit this week is pull that passion, the reason why you're here, really hammer home our goals as a team, and then they came out with a pretty gutsy performance in the first quarter.
In terms of the complacency aspect, is it going to be tough, especially over the next few weeks, not to maybe scoreboard watch a little bit? Because first place would be a big deal, certainly, especially as it relates to home playoff dates and potential matchups and that kind of thing. Is it going to be tough just to really focus on the next 3 weeks here as we round out the regular season?
It's not going to be tough. We've had the luxury of a schedule that kind of builds up as it goes. And, we've got a tougher test this week with Kamloops, who just, barely got eked out by Langley this past weekend. But they're going to be tough. It's a game for them. They could play a spoiler. We're playing it in Kamloops. Lots of reasons for us to, set it up as a trap game. But after that, we've got Langley take another step in a tough direction, and then following that, we've got West Shore, potentially playing for first place. So every week it gets a little bit harder. It's really easy for us to right now just focus on what we have to do.
And the Broncos back in week 3, also at home, came that close to beating the West Shore Rebels in a game. And so how do you prepare for a team like that that's maybe been a little bit more inconsistent as it's come to results this year?
The same thing we do every week, and that's really look at ourselves. And if we're playing our best possible football and we get beat, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. If we're handing points and yards away, that's something we can control. And so if we continue to look at ourselves and be hard on ourselves and really analyze what we're doing, we don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about other teams. And I hope that's evident on the weekend to our guys, is that we do our best job every single play. We're going to be in great shape. And the rest takes care of itself. It's our job as coaches to worry about the scoreboard and the stat sheet, not the players. They just got to do their job one play at a time.
The Okanagan Sun back in action Saturday night in Kamloops. That game is going to be a 6 p.m. kickoff from Hillside Stadium. Thanks for watching.